So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another preview battle for the upcoming patch. And considering the fact that orcs are the topic of discussion, at least today on the Discord, well, by the time this comes out they probably will have moved on, but this is going to be sort of my thoughts on a couple of the orc factions as we go through this battle. I will be playing as Gundabad, so I'm going to be over here, and then just across the way, over on that hill over there, you can see that the Orcs of the Misty Mountains are going to be played by Gondorian Smith. So let's go through the army compositions, and then we will get into the battle at hand. So first of all, we'll go through my army, and at the front, in loose formation, I think I have 5 units of the Orc Marauders. Now, Gundabad in general are a faction that you can do varying degrees of rushes with, and that's kind of how you play them in a 1v1 field battle. They don't really have a lot of defensive power, mainly because their ranged contingent is so weak. But they do make up for this by having a very strong infantry corps and a cavalry contingent that can be used quite effectively to defend that infantry. So delivering the infantry power that you have to the enemy front line is kind of the name of the game with Gundabad. And the 5 units of Orc Marauders I have are just to give myself some numbers, because obviously when you rush you want to be able to overlap your opponent if it's all possible, and if not, you just want to be able to overwhelm them and outlast them in an attrition based fight. And the Orc Marauders will do pretty good at this. I mean, they are a lower tier Orc unit of course, but there are a lot of them and they'll pad out my front line very nicely. Then moving back here, I've got a couple of units of the Witch Realm Pikemen, and pikes are... I like the pikes in this patch. I really find that when you use them to shore up your line, they will really... There's very rarely a situation in which they will do badly for you, and I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that pushing through your pikes with shield wall is something that people will often kind of miss out in terms of micro. But that is something that can be used against pikes, but the Witch Realm Pikemen are a pretty decent pike unit. They've got decent armour, and hopefully they will be a good tool to use to keep my Orc Marauders sort of in check, as it were. Otherwise the Orc Marauders are not going to get very far on their own, and the Witch Realm Pikemen will anchor them quite nicely. Something else that will do that, I think I have 3 units actually of the Guardians of Khan Doom as we sort of cycle over. Or do I only have 2? It might, actually no, it looks like I only have 2 units of the Guardians of Khan Doom. But once again, very effective mainline infantry unit. They were always very good in the last patch. They aren't quite the same powerhouse as they once were. They don't have multiple HP anymore. But as an upper mid-tier infantry unit, I still find they are very important to the way Gundabad do their business, because they are going to be, again, in a similar vein to the Witch Realm Pikemen, they are going to be holding your front line together and doing a very good job of that as well. Over here I think I've got a couple of units of the Gundabad Guard on either side perhaps? Yes, I do. So again, the Gundabad Guard are going to be quite similar, although as spears I can put them into shield wall and push them through the enemy lines if need be, or I could use them to help zone out cavalry. Regardless of what I use them for though, the Gundabad Guard are in a similar vein to the Guardians of Khan Doom, sort of upper mid-tier spears. You can't expect them to be very elite infantry units, but they will still do a decent job at helping to hold my line together. And in terms of the numbers I have, I will also have quite a lot of killing power here. And then over here, a favourite of mine from the last patch, we have the Blackwatch Legion, of course, moved from the Misty Mountains to Gundabad, of which I think I will talk about that in a bit more detail after the battle is over. But the Blackwatch Legion, they aren't multiple HP anymore either, but they do have a very significant shield value of 16, and they will still be able to get into shield wall and push through enemy lines if that's what you want to do with them. And again, it just adds to the fact that my front line is really very difficult to break down quickly, and it means I'm going to be able to get into melee quite nicely. Now I could have gone for a full infantry contingent, but I did bring a couple of units of Snaga archers, and the reason I did this was one of the things the Misty Mountains can leverage against Gundabad, a rush of Gundabad anyway, is having some Snaga stalkers just behind the line. Not stalkers, rather, the skirmishers, the javelins. And that can be something that they could use to equalise the front line fight quite nicely, so if possible I would like to focus them down. But also, the only cavalry that the Misty Mountains can bring are wargs, so even a lower tier archer like this could potentially help swing the mounted fight in my favour. And then back here I also have a unit of Trolls of Angmar. Now this is a very durable troll unit. I believe in terms of killing power, the Trolls of Gundabad are actually more impressive. But I feel as though in this situation, just making sure they last longer in melee will sort of account for any micro mistakes I might make with them. but also again going to be very useful for trying to barrel through the front lines if need be, or maybe go around the flanks and sort of pick off some of the Misty Mountains sort of hiding units, which again they're likely to have. And then finally we have my cavalry contingent. I've got a couple of units of the Warg skirmishers. I decided to bring them because the Warg riders would likely not really offer me too much against the Misty Mountains, simply because that is what they would bring as well, so you're not really gaining any sort of advantage there. Whereas the skirmishers, of course, if my opponent has brought Warg riders, the ranged advantage will be mine. And in the vast majority of cases, I think I would bring the Warg skirmishers anyway, because the javelin fire is very good, and the Warg skirmishers are honestly not bad against cavalry and melee either, so I think that the javelin fire is definitely going to be worth it here. But of course they are quite vulnerable to archers, so I will need to be careful of any Misty Mountains archers that may be on the field. And then finally, we have what in my opinion is the most significant unit Gundabad can bring, and that is the Witch Realm Inquisitors. Because not only are they a very capable melee cavalry, they're arguably the best melee cavalry there is, but also the fact that they cause fear means when you recharge enemy lines, you can send units routing that much easier, so you can use them for multiple things. And also they are the ideal tool to cover your infantry lines from enemy cavalry, because very few cavalry units are going to want to get into a fight with the Witch Realm Inquisitors, if any. So now we shall scoot across the field onto the hill where Gondorian Smith has taken up his position. And at the front he's got some heavy goblin archers, so immediately he's got the skirmish advantage with this, but then you have to expect that. Against Gundabad you're always going to have the skirmish advantage. You don't want to go too heavy on archers, but these heavy goblin archers will be able to skirmish down my Snaga archers if that's the target they go for, or they could pepper down my Orc Marauders, but against the vast majority of my shielded units they won't do too well. Actually the best target for the heavy goblin archers would probably be my Warg skirmishers, to give him the cav advantage, because I think he will need the cavalry advantage if he's going to overcome my infantry line. He's going to need some hammer and anvil. Back here he's got some heavy goblin halberdiers to try and anchor his line, which is not a bad choice because of course halberds are AP, and with this many they should be able to sort of do some nice damage on my more heavily armoured units. They will need backup of course, but they make a pretty decent mainline unit in this situation. Back here we have the Mountain Uruk Blades. They are slightly higher tier than the heavy goblin infantry, and they are also better than the Orc Marauders, so in terms of quality units he has gone for a little bit more. Back here he has a ballista, but we'll get onto that in a moment as we sort of wrap up the rest of his line. He's also got the heavy goblin infantry of course, very good tar pit, but I'm not going to be attacking them with my archers, so they will just be there for their slightly nice, well they're slightly decent shield value and armour values. They still have that, but they aren't going to win any beauty contests in melee. Back here we do have a ballista, and the Orc ballista is very, very effective of course. He's going to need to start opening up on my army very quickly. He does have a very nice view of course, and while it may be tempting to go for my cavalry, I think he would definitely be best off trying to snipe out both my pikemen and my Guardians of Khan Doom, because those are that's the real anchor of my line. I've only got one unit of Blackwatch Legion of course, and the ballista, the Orc ballista, can do a lot of damage very quickly. Back here, his general's bodyguard is the Goblin King's bodyguard, of course the new name for the old Orc bodyguard. Elite infantry unit. In terms of a singular infantry unit, they are the strongest on the field because I haven't brought my Witch Realm Blackguard. So this will be a good unit to throw in when his line starts breaking in a place. He can start to use this. He also has several hidden units, as the Misty Mountains are wont to do. I know, for example, he does have the Snaga skirmishers just in behind the heavy goblin halberds, I think, and he does have some hidden units in the trees as well. So I think he does have a unit of Bolg's champions and some Warg riders and some Warg skirmishers. So without further ado, let us begin. And of course, the impetus is going to be on me to move forward. If anyone brings an artillery piece, it means they are intending to sort of pick a place and defend it. Now, of course, getting into the mind of Gondorian Smith here, he has got units hidden in these trees, and I think what he is hoping for is that I charge into his lines and then he can sort of wrap around. And that's a perfectly valid strategy, because of course I am going to be forced to come forward, and charging into his lines is something that, as Gundabad, I want to do, because having a look at his army, I did notice the fact that he has artillery means that's an expensive unit, which means I'm definitely going to have the numbers advantage here. So I might be able to get some nice wraparounds. Now, I did actually send my cavalry over here, but based on where Gondorian Smith is, there's not really a lot of room to manoeuvre over here. So while I do sort of swing out wide with my cavalry, I quickly determine that going through this narrow avenue of attack over here with all of my cavalry units is likely not a good idea, so I do turn them around, and I will try and probe the other direction. But as you can see, this is what you're going to be seeing when you're facing Gundabad a lot, just a sea of orcs heading towards you. Let's get in close. As you can see, the Guardians of Khan Doom, really the centre, pride and joy of my infantry line here, with their red marked shields, and the Gundabad Guard as well. The Snaga archers will come in very handy to deal with the Snaga javelins. You can actually see that the Orc Marauders are the target of the heavy goblin archers at the moment, so they're focusing down a single unit on this flank, and I think that's because he was fearing that my cavalry would sort of push along this flank as well, so he wanted to make sure that I didn't have any infantry, but of course that does change. And this Orc Marauder unit, you know, they've been cut down. They've lost nearly 100 men just from a few volleys of very low tier archers, so you know, this unit of Orc Marauders has definitely been whittled down. But Orc Marauders, of course, I don't really care if they die all that much. And now the heavy goblin archers are going to need to run because the Orc Marauders are bearing down on them. And now the Snaga skirmishers have revealed themselves. They're throwing their javelins into the front line. Again, my Orc Marauders are the ones taking the vast majority of this damage, and I've got plenty of them to spare. As long as I can keep my Guardians of Khan Doom in rude health and my Witch Realm Pikemen, my front line will do very well for itself. And there we can see that some of the Snaga skirmishers actually getting caught by the Orc Marauders. And now you can see my cavalry is also cycling around to the other side as I continue to sort of push into the front line, and this is what you will see as Gundabad. Most of the time my Orc Marauders. I'm also getting this unit of damaged Orc Marauders around the flank. Going to be trying to attack, just tying up some of the infantry units as much as I can. You can also see those Trolls of Angmar going around the side. My Snaga archers going after his javelins, focusing them down to make sure he doesn't have much punch in the front line. But now you can see that his hidden troops have been uncovered, so this is the ambush. And over here he does have a couple of units of Black Uruks of the mountains, and immediately I charge my Trolls of Angmar in because they were taken by surprise. They're going to kill a lot of these Black Uruks, but they won't win this fight without support, I don't think. But now the all-important cavalry fight is going to happen, because really in this sort of situation with the Orcs, whoever can rear-charge the enemy first is going to have a huge advantage. And first of all we have these Warg Riders, we also have the Warg Skirmishers coming in, and this unit of Warg Riders has come out first of all. The Black Uruks are going to win. I have actually also peeled off a unit of my Gundabad Guard over here to help out my Trolls. The Bolgs Champions are moving in. My Snaga have also changed their target to the Wargs. You can also see that my Wargs are also coming in. The Javelins being thrown already, and the Wargs already taking some pretty substantial losses. My Orc Marauders tying up the Bolgs Champions, and I'm immediately starting to throw my Javelins in. Meanwhile, if you look over here on the front line engagement, I am pushing in with my Blackwatch Legion, but overall the survivability of these lads is not quite as strong as it once was, and the Heavy Goblin Spears, which were also hidden, have now come into the fray, and with their AP damage they should be able to pull down these Blackwatch Legion. They've gone too far into the front lines, but the front line engagement for me is going quite well. However, I'm also still trying to tie up the enemy team's Wargs, going in there with my Witch Realm Inquisitors, who have already killed a unit of the Warg Riders, sending them routing. Witch Realm Inquisitors, the fear that they imbue is a really big deal, and the Witch Realm Inquisitors here are going to be enough to take out a second unit of Warg Riders, so all on their lonesome, my Witch Realm Inquisitors are really laying a beating down on the Misty Mountains cavalry, and really the only significant unit he has left of the Bolgs Champions. He does have a unit of skirmishers of his own, which I do need to keep clear of my Witch Realm Inquisitors. Now this unit of Marauders has just been trying to make life uncomfortable for the Bolgs Champions, because again, the Bolgs Champions are a very strong anti-cavalry unit themselves. I would be quite interested to see which one out of them and the Witch Realm Inquisitors was more effective against cavalry, because the Witch Realm Inquisitors seem very, very powerful. And also they have the armour advantage, where the Bolgs Champions of course can be a little bit vulnerable to missiles. The Bolgs Champions are actually going to cycle around the back now, and we're getting into a pure javelin fight over here. Meanwhile, my other unit of Warg Skirmishers is going to go to the other flank, and over here you can see that the Black Uruks are winning their infantry fight. However, I think, yep, a rear charge coming in from my Witch Realm Inquisitors, and this means that my Trolls are all dead at this point, but my Gundabad Guard are going to be able to hold, and as long as those rear charges keep up, it's going to be very bad for them. I did also notice that he's got some Snaga skirmishers in melee, so I switched to fire ammunition to maybe try and break them, because at this point on this side of the line, all of my Orc Marauders have essentially died. I had to peel off some of them to try and bottle up the Misty Mountains cavalry, but actually if we just tone things down just a little bit. You can see that my Witch Realm Pikemen are now largely on their own over here, and yet they're still able to hold back an enormous amount of men. Also going to be able to get that fire ammunition in there. Meanwhile, these units of pikes have actually fallen behind the engagement a little bit, so I'm going to be starting to push them up as well. In the middle where my Guardians of Khan Doom were, I've done some really good work. But over here, where the Misty Mountains archers actually made some dents in my line, the Mountain Uruk blades were able to get around the flank and quickly engage, and now they're going to recharge. However, my Snaga archers are going to really pay some dividends here, because I'm going to be able to shoot into the backs of these units. I'm also going to be able to shoot into these Snaga skirmishers who are trying to sort of get some enfilading fire down the line. But this is not going to help them for too long, because my Warg skirmishers, which at this point are out of ammunition, you know, they were trading fire with the Misty Mountains and getting their javelins into the Misty Mountains Wargs. They're going to get a nice charge off into the Snaga skirmishers, and they're already wavering, so this will be enough to send them routing. And without the javelins going around the flank, he will struggle, but he does have the Bolgs champions coming around. And the rear charge from the Bolgs champions would certainly not help my cause, but you can see he's also committed his Goblin King bodyguard. Over here you can see the fire arrows of the Snaga continuing to push off the Snaga skirmishers over there, who did rout under the fire ammunition. And a lot of the Misty Mountains line is now shaken. You can see that not many of the halberdiers have survived this encounter. I mean, you've got a unit of 90 over here, but they were just no match for the shields and the heavy armour values. You know, they just didn't have the quality to contain my Guardians of Khan Doom and my Witch-Realm pikemen, who of course, pikes can outrange halberds, so that certainly didn't help them that much. Meanwhile, these Warg skirmishers over here are being engaged by the Bolgs champions. And this is not a fight that my Warg skirmishers can hope to win, particularly not when they were rear charged, so I do need to be careful. The Bolgs champions could yet turn this fight around. At this point though, the ballista has not actually fired a single shot, and I think that's because he's been consistently changing his targets as my army has moved, and the infantry is now far too close for him to get a decent shot off. Well, if you have a look over here, what's left of these Warg skirmishers, I charged in and decided to finish off what's left of the Misty Mountains Warg skirmishers over here. And now I'm going to be able to rear charge his line with my Witch-Realm Inquisitors, and the fear, these guys are already shaken, so I'm hoping to start just breaking his line up and down. As we have a look at the percentages of kills, I'm a significant amount ahead at this point. And over here, they actually are only shaken, so they didn't actually break as easily as I was thinking, but still getting some rear charges. They are melee cav, so it's not going to be devastating charges that the Witch-Realm Inquisitors have, but even so. Over here, where the goblins are starting to wrap around my lines, I am starting to shoot my Snaga, my fire arrows over here, just to try and hold this part of the line together, because this is really the only problem area I have at the moment. Everywhere else in the battle I'm doing relatively well. Even the Bolgs champions are starting to run off, because with the support of the Snaga archers that were firing in, they were starting to take a bit of damage. They only lost one unit model, but even so. Meanwhile over here you can see that the ballista tried to turn around and try to shoot my Witch-Realm Inquisitors, but unfortunately artillery is not known for being swift, certainly not as swift as cavalry, and I'm going to be able to charge in and shut down that ballista crew. So that's essentially like 1,000 florins down the drain there. Meanwhile, what's going on over here, you can actually see breaking the heavy goblin infantry. My Witch-Realm pikemen performed very well on the front line in this battle, continuing the Snaga javelins. The Gundabad guard over here, the cycle charging that the Witch-Realm Inquisitors provided. I mean, the Black Uruks over here, they may still be able to pull out a victory over the Gundabad guard, but this is not an important fight. I can turn around my Snaga to finish them off if I need to, when all is said and done. The Snaga skirmishers have returned from routing, but they're very quickly going to find themselves on the receiving end of a Warg skirmisher charge. They are throwing their javelins back in retaliation, but it's not going to be enough. And now they're up to charge speed, barreling through the routing heavy goblin infantry, and that might be enough to send them routing again, to be honest with you. Not good for them. He does still have his archers back here trying to shoot, but the archers, they're not really going to do much damage to the Witch-Realm Inquisitors. The heavy armour and shields of the Inquisitors is just too much. And over here you can actually see that I've got my Warg skirmishers, and I'm now going to be able to rear charge this section of line as well. These Orc Marauders are routing. Now his Bolgs champions are getting into my Snaga archers, but at this point my archers have already paid for themselves more than enough. So I'm more than willing to throw them under the bus just to keep these Bolgs champions busy and finish off what's left of his infantry line. I mean, the Goblin King bodyguard over here, defeat seems certain for them as well. You know, they're just not able to withstand the onslaught from the Guardians of Khan Doom and the Gundabad guard that are left over here. Still 89 of them remaining. And I'm getting in these Warg skirmishers. I'm going to go back for more, go back for seconds on these ballista. Because the ballista does still worry me, because it could destroy my cavalry in one fell swoop. But I'm going to make sure that they get taken care of very quickly. And the Witch-Realm Inquisitors pursuing the routing units down the hill. And at this point, I'm also starting to break through the middle. There's really no chance that the Misty Mountains are going to be able to get back into this fight. So as we go back up to 1 speed, the Bulks champions, they're going to try and get a rear charge on my lines, but it's going to be a bit too little too late, as it were. A decent charge, though. They do have a better charge than the Witch Realm Inquisitors. So, but again over here, the Snaga Archers immediately turn their attentions on them. This unit of Snaga is out of ammunition, so I'm committing them to melee. Rear charges of my own going off. And also I'm bringing over my Walk Skirmishers to bottle up the Bulks champions. The Orc Marauders have returned from routing. Those heavy Goblin Archers on the flank have been trying to shoot in, but ultimately the amount of damage they were able to do against the vast majority of my heavily armoured army, very limited. Only really the Orc Marauders and my Walk Skirmishers would be vulnerable to such things. And ultimately this is going to be the end. As we sort of take a look over here, the end of the Bulks champions. Bulks champions actually routing after being sandwiched between Wargs and Snaga, and with that Gondorian Smith admitted defeat. There was no chance without the Bulks champions. And that is going to be it. And speaking about the two factions at hand, now Gundabad, they are perhaps a little bit one-dimensional in the sense that in this situation you can always guarantee that they are going to attack you, simply because they don't have the ranged power to be able to sit back defensively. They just don't. Like the best archer unit they have are Goblin Trackers, which are obviously not going to win any skirmish fight with any basic archer from any other faction. So they're going to rush you the vast majority of the time. And one thing that you will have to deal with is a very strong infantry corps, because without expensive archers to buy, they have more money freed up to spend money on that infantry, which is why I was able to afford Guardians of Khan Doom, Gundabad Guard, and Witch Realm Pikemen. So with those three units together, you're going to have not necessarily a front line which does damage really, really quickly, but a front line which is going to be able to outlast yours, particularly with the backup of the pikes. And, you know, if need be, you can push through weak sections of line with the Gundabad Guard, and the Guardians of Khan Doom tie it all together. And obviously the Orc Marauders are just going to be there for numbers, and they do that. They fill that role very well. I mean, Orcs are always going to have that disposable nature to them. You could bring a couple of units of archers, like I did here, against a faction which is able to respond to that a little bit more harshly, though I would definitely recommend you either just go full infantry and cavalry, or maybe go for a unit of Snaga skirmishers or something like that you keep back until the late game. But the faction I do want to talk about a little bit more is the Misty Mountains, and that is because I feel as though they are the weakest faction in the game at the moment, noticeably. The two factions that have least impressed me so far are the Orcs of the Misty Mountains and Gondor. But we'll talk about Gondor another time. But for now, the Misty Mountains. Now, I was actually talking a little bit to Kuro about this, and one of the things that they are going to be doing is increasing the amount of men in the unit of the Blackback Berserkers, because at the moment they're too expensive for what they offer. But once again, the Blackback Berserkers will be made a unit that is scary to fight, which is only right. And they would be able to add a lot to the Misty Mountains ambush, because obviously here, if the Blackback Berserkers had been in that ambush, and as they will be with the increased unit models, my Gundabad Guard would have been savaged, and then he would have been able to start rear charging my line with Blackback Berserkers. That's one thing. The other thing, which Gondorian Smith actually pointed out in this fight as it was going on, was the fact that for some reason the Orcs of the Misty Mountains no longer have access to the Mountain Uruk pikes. And I fail to see the logic behind that decision. And this battle actually is the ideal sort of showcase as to why the Mountain Uruk pikes could be used to really anchor the Misty Mountains line, because in this situation where I brought pikemen of my own, the heavy goblin halberds were just not able to lay down their effectiveness. They would just push back. And in that situation, there's not really much the Misty Mountain infantry line can do. They don't have the survivability. You know, they break easily. They're goblins. The only unit they have that could potentially try and counter pikes are heavy goblin spears, but the way you would do that is by pushing into the lines. And in this situation where the Witch Realm pikemen are combined together with stuff like Guardians of Khan Doom, that's a death sentence for the heavy goblin spears, because you're going to be sending them into units that are going to far outclass them in terms of melee prowess. So I think that the Misty Mountains need their Mountain Uruk pikes back, because not only would that give their front line more of an ability to stand. It would help bind together their heavy goblin spears and their heavy goblin infantry much better along the front line, because it wouldn't, obviously this is an extreme example, Gundabad are going to send a lot of infantry at you, but even in another sort of infantry heavy fight, like, they're going to need pikes, I think, to deal with something like dwarf pikes. If the dwarves decided to bring Ironfoot pikes, what are the Misty Mountains infantry, what's the Misty Mountains infantry going to do? You know, they could try and, again, the only thing they could do is try and push in with heavy goblin spears, but the dwarf infantry is going to destroy them even faster, arguably, than the Gundabad infantry would. So I do think that they need their Mountaineeric pikes back, because, again, it would also mean that enemy cavalry would be less of a juicy prospect, as it were, to rear charge the Misty Mountains lines. Because at the moment, a rear charge on the Misty Mountains lines is going to completely crumble them, because the morale of the goblins is obviously very low. And I feel as though having pikes in the line that you could quickly turn around and really make the enemy pay for that, potentially, is something that they do need, because the halberds at the moment are just not a worthy replacement for the Mountaineeric pikes. And again, you wouldn't see the Mountaineeric pikes in every matchup, but in a situation like this, the Misty Mountains really need it, because I feel like the ambush sort of part of the Misty Mountains army is something which they are a little bit too reliant on at the moment, and this was the problem that Eriador had in the last patch. If you were able to get a very nice ambush off as Eriador, that was great. You would probably go on to win the match, but if you didn't, you were doomed. And I feel like that's going to be something which the Misty Mountains struggle with, and I just feel like they do need something. I mean, I was fearing that the loss of the Blackwatch Legion would take the magic away from the Misty Mountains a little bit, and while it hasn't been as bad as I was fearing, it's still left them a little bit hollow, in my opinion. And I feel like the Mountaineeric pikes being re-added to their roster would help them in that regard. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a reason why the Mountaineeric pikes are no longer in the Misty Mountains roster, but they feel lacking at the moment, especially next to the other three orc factions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this battle. You know, it's a good old-fashioned orc rumble, no messing around, charging into one another's lines. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.